fishing, which has caught the attention of virtually everyone for very good reasons, most profoundly the future of the world, depending on food security and the stability of regions that are importantly involved in fishing as a source of protein. Roughly, numbers range variously.
John, I think it's difficult to hear you. I think the mic needs to be turned up, or you move the mic a little closer.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much. A pleasure to chair this IUU fishing panel. The context of IUU fishing in the United States government perhaps was marked on June 17th of 2014 with the release of the recommendation, the White House presidential memorandum on establishing a comprehensive framework to combat illegal, unreported, and unregulated, or IUU, fishing and seafood fraud. That whole supply chain covered in something like 15 recommendations, the third of which directs the Secretaries of Defense and Homeland Security to include IUU fishing threat analysis and monitoring as a component of U.S. international efforts to increase overall maritime domain rights. So there's a good policy background for doing the work that will be described by our esteemed speakers today. It's recognized in this document that the United States' greatest asset in fighting domestic IUU fishing and seafood fraud is the vast amount of data collected across U.S. fisheries. So this is very germane to our conference. Just to add a little note, the Pew Research Charitable Institute estimates the magnitude of IUU fishing by one of the major perpetrators in the Gulf of Guinea at something on the order of $7 billion a year. In the South China Sea, something over $2 billion. This is not little stuff. It impacts food security and regional stability in an enormous way. But with that context, the presidential mandate and the magnitude of the problem, I'd like to start by introducing our first speaker, Ms. Jennifer Austin from Google, who has made this business of IUU fishing one of her many interest areas, and has a fascinating presentation for you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Austin, and I manage Google's Ocean program. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background on our Ocean program. So it was inspired back in 2007. Sylvia Earle, who is an ocean explorer, a National Geographic explorer in residence, she was at a conference in Spain with the founding CEO of Keyhole, which became Google Earth when we acquired it. And she said, you know, I really love Google Earth, I fly all around, but you should really call it Google Dirt because you're missing all the oceans. And John laughed, and he's like, Sylvia, you should come give a tech talk at Google. And I guess that was actually 2006. And so I got to host Sylvia's first tech talk, and that led to a number of us starting to work on building a virtual ocean in Google Earth as sort of a 20% project. So we launched this virtual map in 2009, and then I've spent the last several years updating the data with many partners, some of whom are here. So we have contributions you can see in this bottom attribution string: Scripps, Institute of Oceanography, the Navy, NGA, Noaa, MBARI, University of Hawaii, and many others. JHA in Japan, and IPCOW from a lot of the Arctic synthesis countries. So we have basically fused together this multi-resolution map of the ocean that anyone can go explore. And anyone from sort of people using it in a professional sense to, this is a couple of place marks from a tour I made with my son, who's in first grade, and he taught his first grade class all about the ocean. We flew underwater. This is Monterey Bay Canyon, which is a giant giant canyon off the coast here that's deeper than the Grand Canyon. And if we also have education content where you can kind of learn about what's in the ocean in these areas. We work with National Geographic to overlay their image with Noaa of the Titanic. So you can go and see that the Titanic is in 2 places. So it's really been kind of a neat educational tool for people to use. And I've seen or heard of people using it in sort of joint exercises with foreign countries where the U.S. Is sharing data with other nations, and they use Google Earth as sort of this shared platform for visualizing their operations. So it's been a neat project. Great. So then I just wanted to go into how did I get into maritime domain awareness. It started several years ago at National Geographic. Phil McGillivray at the back with the U.S. Coast Guard and I were in an IUU fishing breakout at this session hosted by National Geographic and the Wait Foundation. And there was a lot of conversation about, all of this, many things are happening and it seems impossible to tackle. And we just started thinking about, well, what could we do? What would be possible? And it started familiarizing me with the issues around IUU fishing and what sort of role could Google potentially play. And at the first Economist Ocean Summit, maybe 3 years ago, President Grimson of Iceland was up on stage and he said, hey, I love Google Earth, but why aren't we tracking all the ships like you can track all the planes? So I went up to him and I said, oh, that's a great idea. And he said, well, why don't you come to Iceland and see how we do it in Iceland? And in Iceland, they require all of their fishing vessels in their waters to be tracked. And Trackwell is their technology company. They track them all. If they sold it to everyone as safety of navigation, if you stop transponding within 20 minutes, they send a helicopter to make sure that you're okay. And if you're not okay, then they help you. But if you are okay, then you pay the helicopter bill. So it's an incentive program, and everyone knows where everyone is. All the moms know where their children are out fishing, and it's sort of an interesting model. And because of that, they put out these sort of sustainability guidelines on fishing, and they have cod equivalent trading quotas, and they barcode all their fish, and they can sort of track the sustainability of their fish. And I think it's a really neat model. And that sort of started us thinking, oh, okay, well, that's great. What possible role could we play? So my mentor, Michael Jones, who was formerly Google's chief technology advocate, he introduced me to the CEO of SpaceQuest. And they're a company in DC that had created a couple of these CubeSats to detect AIS from space. And I think some of this is from Guy Thomas's work. I saw him earlier. There he is. And so I got introduced to Dino, and Dino and I were talking, and he let us use 6 months of their AIS global ship tracking data set to start to play with. So Google has a lot of data centers. This is one of our data centers. And we started to think, well, if we cloud host all that data, would it allow for greater visualization and analysis? So what developer colleagues of mine did is they took that 6 months of data, which is a fairly large data set, and they put it up on Google Cloud infrastructure. And then they developed the code that would let you render that data dynamically on top of the Google Maps API. So I'm actually going to switch, see if that actually works, to a live demo. And this had never been done before, so it's 10 million points, cloud hosted with 300,000 points dynamically rendered on the Maps API. So unlike all live demos, the live demo gods are... Well, what you would see if this were working is you would see red track lines going out across the oceans, and what you would see is after a couple of days, the red track lines fade away to be replaced by other track lines. And sorry, I was working at my table, but the point of it is just that you would see these red track lines overlapping across the ocean, and then over time you can start to see sort of behaviors. There's transiting, there's fishing. And that was great, so I apologize that didn't work. But it was with proprietary data. So then what we did next is my colleagues took the same code that they had written to make that SpaceQuest visualization possible with the ship track lines going across the world. and they instead used the Noaa iCodes dataset, which is a dataset with ships and buoys. Again, a large number of points rendered dynamically on the Maps API. And so you can see in blue are buoys, red is ships, and it sort of gives you a sense of traffic. So the whole point of this demonstration is just that anyone can use this code. We've open sourced it and put it on GitHub under Brendan Kenny's account. And anyone can use this code and cloud host their own data to do this sort of dynamic rendering. And although this is ship tracking, you could imagine you could pull in lots of other complex data sets. So sea surface temperature, chlorophyll, boundary areas. Like you could start to write complex queries that would let you make sense of the data in a more straightforward way. And that was really the goal of this project. And if anyone's interested, I can share with you all the links. In the future, we're also, working with Skybox. Like, could we somehow use this to look at where imagery from space might be helpful? So last year in April, Phil McGillivray, who's here, and João Tasso de Souza from the University of Portugal, he and I and a couple of other people co-hosted this Ocean Agenda Maritime Domain Awareness Workshop, where we talked a lot about these issues. And John Stasny, this is his slide actually from SPAWAR, presented on the Sea Vision platform that he showed yesterday. And what John and I started talking about is like, well, what would be useful to do next? So they have this great maritime domain awareness platform, which integrates a lot of data. They use a lot of open source tools. But what else could we do to make that impactful and sort of help move the needle? And so we've been in discussion about that, and we'll be talking, small set of us, tomorrow further about what are the key things that Google can play in our role. We're not IUU fishing experts, it's more technology that potentially could be useful toward this challenge. And another thing John and I have been talking about, how do we scale? Sea Vision right now is focused on West Africa. Is there a way to bring it to the rest of the ocean? Here are all the countries that participate in the nearshore MSSIS data sharing network. But there are a lot of other countries in the Pacific, where I just was a few months ago for the UN SIDS meeting, and they really have no capacity to track what's going on in their waters. And I guess another outcome, one potential thing that we could potentially do is look at potentially being a partner on hosting some of the big data sets, like meteorological data sets that could be useful in Sea Vision. And we've been talking with John about that, the Sentinel-1 radar, and there are other data sets. So then I wanted to, before I show this, I also wanted to just, another thing that sort of came out of the Ocean Agenda workshop is, oh, there it is. Sorry, the internet was just slow. So this is that 6 months of AIS Space Quest global ship tracking data. And what you can see right here, here's all of this transiting activity. You can see up here Iceland, everybody's transponding. And then you look over Alaska, clearly here are these fishing grounds. And what's interesting, all of these sort of areas that Chile has been trying to monitor, lots of fishing behavior going out along out there. Here's the Galapagos. So it was a really interesting visualization that got us really thinking about, well, what could we do next? So another outcome of security. That came out of the Ocean Agenda is a partnership between Google, Oceana, and SkyTruth, where they ended up taking 2 years of Space Quest AIS data, throwing out all the transiting, just ships going A, B, and looking specifically at fishing. And what they did is they created this animation where they looked at fishing behavior, and then they overlaid protected areas. So here's Hawaii, and we have the former head manager of one of the big protected areas, Midori Akamine, who's here, and she's contributed a lot of ideas to our thinking in this. They have announced this project to bring more transparency to this information and try to bring this information to a larger audience so people are aware of the kind of scale of global fishing that's happening everywhere. Much of it legal in the high seas, and it's interesting that it isn't seemingly better regulated. From my perspective as a just technology person. Okay, so I talked about some of the work we've done on domain awareness, and we've also been, sort of curious what other things would be interesting to follow. And this is a slide from Joao's work at the University of Porto on domain awareness, and they'll be doing a domain awareness exercise this summer in the Azores. And they've been sort of working on, like, how do we integrate data from lots of different robots so that we can sort of bring to bear better domain awareness in these sort of areas that we're trying to control, like marine protected areas. And this is just a slide speaking to a project that called Earth Engine. So my manager manages the Earth Engine team that sits next to me. And what they've been doing is looking at how do we use Google Cloud infrastructure to cloud host big data and make it faster for change analysis. So they basically took the 40-year Landsat archive and cloud hosted it and worked with scientists like Matt Hansen to do global forest change. And if you do a Google search for time lapse, you can see a number of the animations looking at deforestation, ice melt, changes in water. So it's been really powerful. And at the end of last year, we published our first ocean data set to that platform. This is the Noaa sea surface temperature Pathfinder data set. This is sort of a snapshot. And that data is all hosted now in our Earth Engine gallery, and we're looking for scientists who might want to write algorithms and do analysis, and then eventually, potentially, that could be an interesting feed for Sea Vision, or for those looking at, like, where should we prioritize our domain awareness efforts based on where people would be likely fishing. And then this is just another fun little thing. Phil at the Coast Guard had introduced us to Marine Advanced Research, and I think Mark Gunderson from there is at the back. And they developed this really stable catamaran-like platform, and we took our Street View camera and we put it on top. And we collected the first ever Street View imagery from the San Francisco shoreline and published it last year. And so they've been looking at, could this platform be useful potentially in the domain awareness context. So that's another little contribution. And the last contribution that isn't directly around IUU fishing, but is around public engagement. So how do you get people to care about this issue and make it more real for them? So I also manage this, the Underwater Street View project. And we worked with this nonprofit in Australia. They built an underwater Street View camera modeled after our Street View cars. And they took it underwater, and we've launched about 50 locations around the ocean. And anyone can go to maps.google.com/ocean and explore minke whales, coral reefs, whale sharks, and really kind of go around the world and get a sense for what does it look like in these ocean habitats that people are trying to protect. Like, why should they care? And I think it could be a really powerful tool. At the Coast Guard Pacific Forum last year, which I hosted at Google, one of the people from the Coast Guard was saying he'd really love to take this camera and collect imagery in the drift nets so that people would understand why it's important to have better regulations because of all the wildlife that gets killed. So I think it makes it much more real for people if you can have some of these engaging tools. I mean, there's all the data, but then there's also connecting with people and policymakers so that they might understand why they should do something. And I just wanted to show that, once we publish that Street View imagery in Google Maps, and I'm launching a bunch of new imagery tomorrow, so you'll have to check in. You can then put it into stereographic mode. So this is the Heron Island sea turtle, which is probably the most viewed underwater image of all time now, because of our driving a huge amount of traffic to it. If you put it into stereo mode and you put it into this $2 cardboard VR headset Google developed, then it puts it in stereo mode. And it's really powerful if anyone wants to see it. I showed it to my daughter and she was just like, sea turtle, and she grabbed it and ran across the field. And I think it makes it a much more compelling experience. So if we can think of ways that consumer technology can be useful for everyone fighting the good fight here to tell their story and help people understand why it's important, then we'd love to be part of that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I'm particularly impressed by not only the quality of the work that you do, but the broad collaboration that you sponsor basically across government, commercial, academic, private sectors, and even individuals, giving tools that help them participate. Just wonderful. The huge penetration that Google has in society is being used for very good purposes, and delighted that you chose to come here and speak with us. Terrific. Our next speaker, Todd Jacobs, is with Noaa and has a remarkably diverse and interesting background and experience with operations around the world, from pole to pole and around the entire planet.